Put your hands where I can see them. You're under arrest for suspicious activity and loitering with intent to commit a crime. People like you don't belong in this neighborhood." The aggressive arrest commands exploded through the upscale shopping district as police officer Derek Martinez aggressively handcuffed the black woman outside the federal courthouse. He slammed her against his patrol car with police authority's superiority, completely unaware he was arresting Marcus Justice, the federal circuit judge whose $347.8 billion judicial authority controlled every police department in the district and could end his law enforcement career with a single court order. Let me take you back to 2:15 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon in downtown Washington, D.C., where assumptions about criminality would destroy a police career and transform law enforcement accountability forever. Marcus Justice had dedicated her life to upholding the law and protecting civil rights. At 48, she was a federal circuit judge for the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most powerful judicial positions in America. Her $347.8 billion judicial authority encompassed federal oversight of police departments, prosecution of civil rights violations, and appellate review of criminal justice cases across 13 states and the District of Columbia. But more than her legal authority, Marcus prided herself on understanding the real-world impact of law enforcement on communities. She had risen from a public defender to federal judge by consistently demonstrating that true justice meant protecting the rights of all citizens, especially those most vulnerable to police misconduct and racial profiling. Today's court session had ended early when the opposing counsel in a major civil rights case requested a continuance. Marcus had decided to walk to a nearby cafe for lunch instead of having it delivered to her chambers. She'd changed from her judicial robes into casual clothes, dark slacks, a simple blouse, and comfortable flats for the 6-block walk. To anyone watching, she looked like a professional woman enjoying a lunch break. No judicial robes, no federal credentials visible, no indication of her authority over the very police officers who patrolled these streets. It was the perfect test of how police treated ordinary citizens during routine encounters. The federal courthouse district was one of D.C.'s most prestigious areas, featuring luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, and government buildings that house some of the nation's most powerful institutions. The Edmund Randolph Federal Building towered over the street where Marcus walked, its imposing facade a symbol of federal judicial authority. As she approached the intersection of Constitution Avenue and 15th Street, Marcus noticed the increased police presence that was typical for the federal district. Police cars patrolled regularly, officers monitored pedestrian traffic, and security was heightened due to the sensitive nature of the government buildings in the area. But what Marcus also noticed with her trained legal eye was how that police presence affected different people differently. Well-dressed professional whites moved freely, barely warranting a glance from officers. Tourists with cameras and maps were treated with friendly helpfulness. But people of color, particularly those in casual clothes or who appeared to be from working-class backgrounds, received longer looks, closer scrutiny, and sometimes direct confrontation. It was exactly the kind of discriminatory policing pattern that Marcus regularly addressed in her federal courtroom through civil rights cases and police accountability hearings. Police officer Derek Martinez had been patrolling the federal district for 3 years, and he developed what he considered a keen eye for spotting suspicious activity. In his mind, certain types of people belonged in certain areas, and when someone didn't fit his profile of who should be in the upscale federal district, it was his job to investigate. When Martinez spotted Marcus walking casually near the federal courthouse, several factors immediately triggered his suspicion. She was black, she was walking alone, she wasn't dressed in expensive business attire, and she appeared to be loitering near government buildings. Martinez pulled his patrol car to the curb and activated his emergency lights. The sudden appearance of police attention caused pedestrians to stop and stare, immediately creating a scene that would escalate rapidly. "Excuse me, ma'am," Martinez called out as he approached Marcus with his hand resting on his weapon. "I need to speak with you." Marcus turned, recognizing the tone and body language that she'd heard described in countless civil rights cases. "Good afternoon, officer. How can I help you?" "Can I see some identification?" Martinez demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Marcus reached slowly for her purse, careful to avoid any sudden movements that might escalate the situation. "May I ask why you need to see my identification?" "You were engaging in suspicious activity in a federal security zone," Martinez replied, using the kind of vague language that Marcus knew from her judicial experience was often used to justify harassment. As Marcus retrieved her driver's license, Martinez's suspicion seemed to increase rather than decrease. Instead of a routine identification check, he began building a criminal case based entirely on his assumptions. "Ma'am, you've been observed loitering in this area for an extended period, behaving in a manner consistent with surveillance of federal buildings," Martinez stated, with the confidence of someone fabricating charges. "Officer, I just finished lunch and I'm walking back to work," Marcus replied calmly, though she could feel the familiar tension of being profiled and criminalized for ordinary behavior. "Work where?" Martinez demanded. "What's your business in this federal district?" The question revealed the core of the discrimination. Martinez assumed that Marcus didn't belong in this area and that her presence required justification. It was exactly the kind of illegal profiling that Marcus had ruled against in countless federal cases. "I work nearby," Marcus replied, choosing not to reveal her position immediately to see how far the officer would take his discriminatory behavior. "Nearby where?" Martinez pressed. "I need specific details about your employment and your reason for being in this secured federal area." Marcus felt the weight of being treated as a suspect criminal simply for existing in a public space. This was the reality that too many citizens faced during police encounters: the presumption of guilt, the demand to justify their presence, the criminalization of ordinary behavior. When Marcus didn't provide the detailed personal information that Martinez felt entitled to demand, he interpreted her constitutional rights as suspicious behavior. "Ma'am, your evasive responses and failure to adequately explain your presence in this federal security zone is escalating this to a detention situation," Martinez announced, reaching for his handcuffs. "Officer, I haven't committed any crime," Marcus said firmly. "I have the right to walk on public sidewalks without providing detailed explanations of my personal business." "Put your hands where I can see them," Martinez exploded with sudden aggression. "You're under arrest for suspicious activity and loitering with intent to commit a crime. People like you don't belong in this neighborhood." The verbal attack rang through the upscale district like a gunshot. Pedestrians stopped to stare as Martinez roughly forced Marcus's hands behind her back and slammed her against his patrol car. The discrimination wasn't subtle anymore. It was public, brutal, and completely illegal. "You have the right to remain silent," Martinez began reciting, but his Miranda rights were delivered with the satisfaction of someone who believed he was removing an undesirable element from an exclusive area. Marcus remained calm despite the humiliation and physical aggression. "Officer Martinez," she said, reading his name badge, "I'm going to need you to call your supervisor immediately. Your supervisor can meet you at the station. Right now, you're being arrested for criminal activity in a federal security zone." The arrest was becoming a public spectacle that demonstrated everything wrong with discriminatory policing. A crowd had gathered, some filming with their phones, others expressing concern about what they were witnessing. "This is wrong," called out a woman who had been walking nearby. She wasn't doing anything illegal. A businessman in an expensive suit approached Martinez. "Officer, I saw this woman just walking normally. Are you sure this arrest is necessary?" Martinez turned on the bystanders with authority. "Sir, I need you to step back. This is a police matter involving criminal activity in a federal security zone." The businessman, who was white and well-dressed,
received a respectful response despite questioning Martinez's actions. The contrast with how Marcus was being treated, roughly handcuffed and publicly humiliated, illustrated the racial bias that was driving the entire encounter. A local news reporter, Jennifer Chen, had been covering a story at the nearby courthouse when she noticed the commotion. She approached with her cameraman, recognizing that police arrests in the federal district often involved significant legal issues. "Officer, can you tell us what charges are being filed?" she asked, holding her microphone toward Martinez. "Suspicious activity, loitering with criminal intent, and failure to comply with federal security protocols," Martinez replied, clearly enjoying the attention and the opportunity to demonstrate his law enforcement authority. The charges were vague enough to be meaningless and specific enough to sound serious, exactly the kind of fabricated criminal accusations that Marcus had seen prosecutors dismiss countless times in her federal courtroom. As Martinez prepared to transport Marcus to the police station, she asked to make her legally required phone call. "You can call whoever you want from the station," Martinez replied dismissively. "Officer, I have the right to make a phone call now, and I'm requesting to contact my supervisor to inform them of my detention." "Your supervisor?" Martinez laughed harshly. "Lady, I don't know what kind of job you think you have, but your supervisor isn't going to help you with federal criminal charges." Marcus pulled out her phone, which Martinez reluctantly allowed her to use while she remained handcuffed. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "Sarah, this is Judge Justice. I need you to contact the Chief Judge, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and court security. I've been illegally arrested by Officer Derek Martinez of the Metropolitan Police Department." The effect on Martinez was immediate. His confident smirk faltered as he heard the words Judge Justice and U.S. Attorney's Office. Sarah Martinez, Marcus's judicial clerk, responded immediately. "Judge Justice, are you safe? I'm contacting the Chief Judge and federal security right now." Marcus held the phone so her voice would carry clearly. "I'm being detained on fabricated charges of suspicious activity. Officer Martinez has arrested me for walking near the federal courthouse where I work."
Martinez stood frozen as the reality of his situation began to sink in. The woman he had arrested for suspicious activity near the federal courthouse was apparently a federal judge who worked at the federal courthouse. "Ma'am," Martinez said nervously, "if there's been some kind of misunderstanding—" "Officer Martinez," Marcus interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding federal courtrooms. "There's been no misunderstanding. You profiled me, fabricated criminal charges, and arrested me for walking in public while black." Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She answered on speaker. "Judge Justice, this is Chief Judge Patricia Rodriguez. Federal court security is en route to your location. Are you injured?" "I'm unharmed but illegally detained. Officer Martinez arrested me for suspicious activity while I was walking back to the courthouse from lunch." "Officer Martinez," Chief Judge Rodriguez's voice came through the phone with the authority of the federal judiciary. "You are ordered to release Judge Justice immediately and report to your supervisor for disciplinary action." The crowd of bystanders had grown larger, many filming the extraordinary scene of a police officer who had apparently arrested a federal judge. Martinez's face had gone pale as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Within minutes, the scene was transformed by the arrival of federal court security, representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and supervisors from the Metropolitan Police Department. What had started as routine police harassment had become a federal incident involving civil rights violations and police misconduct. Marcus was immediately released from handcuffs by federal court security, while Martinez found himself surrounded by his own supervisors demanding explanations for his actions. "Judge Justice," said Federal Court Security Chief Michael Thompson, "we sincerely apologize for this incident. We're conducting an immediate investigation into Officer Martinez's conduct." U.S. Attorney Lisa Williams approached with obvious concern. "Your Honor, we want to assure you that this illegal arrest will be thoroughly investigated as a potential civil rights violation."
Police Chief Robert Jackson arrived at the scene, looking deeply concerned about the legal and political implications of his officer arresting a federal judge. Judge Justice, I want to personally apologize and assure you that Officer Martinez's actions do not represent the values of our department. But Marcus wasn't interested in apologies. She was focused on the systemic problem that Martinez's behavior represented. Chief Jackson, she said with judicial authority, this wasn't an isolated incident. This was racial profiling, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations. Officer Martinez felt comfortable arresting me because he assumed I had the power to fight back. As federal investigators documented the scene and interviewed witnesses, the full scope of Martinez's misconduct became clear. He had violated multiple federal laws and constitutional rights based purely on racial profiling. Officer Martinez, said FBI Special Agent Sarah Kim, who had arrived to investigate potential civil rights violations, "You're being detained for questioning regarding federal crimes committed under color of law." The irony was stunning. Martinez, who had arrested Marcus for fabricated federal crimes, was now being investigated for actual federal crimes. News reporter Jennifer Chen approached Marcus for a statement. "Judge Justice, can you tell us what happened here today?" What happened here today happens to countless Americans every day. Citizens are criminalized for ordinary behavior, arrested on fabricated charges, and treated as guilty until proven innocent. The difference is that I have the authority to seek justice. Most victims of police misconduct don't. The gathered crowd included several people who stepped forward to share their own experiences with discriminatory policing. "Judge, this same officer stopped me last month for looking suspicious while I was waiting for my wife outside the bank," said Robert Washington, an elderly black man. "He made me show ID and questioned me for 20 minutes. Maria Rodriguez added, "My son was arrested by this officer for loitering while waiting for the bus. He spent 6 hours in jail before the charges were dropped."
As the scene was secured and witness statements were taken, Marcus used her authority to ensure that Martinez's misconduct would be thoroughly investigated and prosecuted. "Special Agent Kim," Marcus said, "I want a complete investigation of Officer Martinez's arrest record. I suspect today's incident is part of a pattern of civil rights violations." Within hours, federal investigators had accessed Martinez's employment records and discovered a disturbing pattern. Over 3 years, he had made 127 arrests for suspicious activity, 89% of which involved people of color. Of those arrests, 78% resulted in dropped charges due to lack of evidence. Judge Justice, Special Agent Kim reported, "Officer Martinez appears to have been systematically targeting minority citizens with false arrests. We're looking at potential federal charges for conspiracy against civil rights." Marcus wasn't surprised. Martinez's confident behavior suggested someone who had engaged in discriminatory policing for years without consequences. "I want every one of his victims contacted and offered support for filing civil rights lawsuits," Marcus instructed, "and I want a federal investigation into whether his supervisors were aware of this pattern and failed to act." The story of a federal judge being arrested for suspicious activity while walking near her own courthouse became national news within hours. Video footage from bystanders showed the entire incident, from Martinez's initial profiling to the federal response. But Marcus used the media attention strategically, turning her personal experience into a broader conversation about police accountability and civil rights. That evening, she held a press conference at the federal courthouse, still wearing the casual clothes she'd been arrested in. "Today, I experienced what millions of Americans experience regularly, being criminalized for existing while black. Officer Martinez felt comfortable arresting me because he assumed I was powerless. He was wrong about my power, but he was right about the system that protects police officers who engage in discriminatory policing. She announced immediate changes. Her court would fast-track all pending civil rights cases against the Metropolitan Police Department. Federal oversight of police practices would be expanded, and she would personally review every case involving Martinez's arrests. Officer Martinez's career in law enforcement is over, Marcus stated with judicial finality. But ending one officer's career isn't enough. We need systematic reform to ensure this never happens again. Within 30 days of the incident, Martinez faced both federal criminal charges and civil lawsuits from his victims. The FBI investigation had uncovered a pattern of civil rights violations spanning his entire 3-year career. Marcus recused herself from Martinez's criminal case to avoid conflicts of interest, but she used her judicial authority to ensure systemic changes in police accountability. The court finds that Officer Martinez engaged in a pattern and practice of civil rights violations under color of law, wrote federal judge William Thompson in his ruling. His actions represent a fundamental violation of constitutional principles and the public trust. Martinez was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and permanent disqualification from law enforcement. But more importantly, his case became a catalyst for broader police reform. The Metropolitan Police Department, facing federal oversight and multiple civil rights lawsuits, implemented comprehensive reforms: bias training for all officers, federal monitoring of arrest patterns, and civilian oversight of misconduct investigations.
Marcus's arrest became a turning point in police accountability nationwide. Federal courts began more aggressively prosecuting civil rights violations, and police departments faced increased scrutiny of their arrest patterns and practices. The justice case has fundamentally changed how we approach police misconduct, said civil rights attorney David Kim 6 months later. When federal judges experience racial profiling firsthand, it becomes impossible to ignore the systemic nature of the problem. Marcus established the Federal Judicial Oversight Program, requiring quarterly reviews of police arrest data in all districts under her court's jurisdiction. Departments with discriminatory patterns faced federal intervention and reform requirements. She also created the Civil Rights Legal Aid Foundation, providing free legal representation for victims of police misconduct who couldn't afford attorneys. Every person deserves the same legal protection I received. No one should have to be a federal judge to receive justice, Marcus explained. For Marcus, the incident reinforced her understanding that legal authority meant nothing without the willingness to use it for justice. Despite her power and position, she had experienced the same dehumanizing treatment faced by countless citizens. I realized that all my judicial authority meant nothing when I was handcuffed against that police car, she reflected in interviews. If officers can treat a federal judge this way, imagine how they treat people without any recourse. The experience motivated Marcus to expand her focus beyond individual cases to systematic reform. She began speaking at police academies, judicial conferences, and community organizations about the intersection of race, policing, and justice. She also became a mentor for young lawyers and judges, particularly people of color, emphasizing the importance of using legal authority to protect civil rights. The law is only as powerful as those willing to enforce it fairly, she told new federal clerks. Our job isn't just to apply the law, it's to ensure the law protects everyone equally. 3 years after her arrest, Marcus's case had transformed police accountability across the federal court system. Civil rights prosecutions had increased by 340%. Police departments faced regular federal audits, and discriminatory policing patterns were systematically identified and addressed. Officer Martinez's victims had received over $2.3 million in civil rights settlements. The 127 people he had falsely arrested were offered legal support, criminal record expungements, and participation in police reform initiatives. The Metropolitan Police Department became a model for police accountability, with bias training, community oversight, and federal monitoring that other departments studied and adopted. But the most meaningful change was in the daily experiences of citizens who no longer feared being criminalized for ordinary behavior. Police officers knew their arrest patterns were monitored, their biases were being measured, and discriminatory behavior would have federal consequences. Marcus kept a photo from the day of her arrest in her judicial chambers, not of the handcuffs or the humiliation, but of the community members who had spoken up in her defense. It reminded her every day that justice required both legal authority and community courage. The federal judiciary learned that experiencing injustice personally was essential to understanding injustice systematically. Judges who had never faced discrimination couldn't adequately address discrimination in their courtrooms. And for millions of Americans, interactions with police were no longer presumed to be biased, illegal, or dangerous. They could walk in public without fear of being criminalized for their appearance or race. The case of Judge Marcus Justice proved that sometimes the most important gavel you can wield is against injustice itself. Today, the Edmund Randolph Federal Building displays a plaque at the intersection where Marcus was arrested, reading, "Justice requires vigilance. Civil rights demand courage. Constitutional protection belongs to everyone." Marcus still walks to lunch regularly, often in casual clothes, monitoring how police interact with all citizens in the federal district. But now, instead of facing harassment, she sees officers trained in constitutional policing and community respect. Officer Martinez's case became required study in every police academy and law school in America, teaching future officers and lawyers about the consequences of civil rights violations and the importance of constitutional policing. And across the federal court system, the phrase "justice case" has become synonymous with the moment the judiciary chose accountability over authority. Because sometimes the most important arrest you can make is injustice itself.